Commander Velthak's 6 eyes focused intently on the trembling figure across the metal table. The Nexari High Command's debriefing chamber felt colder than usual, blue-tinted walls reflecting the harsh overhead lights. Across from him sat Captain Morden, once considered one of their finest battlefield commanders, now reduced to a shell of his former self. The room's silence was broken only by the steady hum of the air recycling system and the distant sounds of the military base. Velthak had seen many soldiers return from battle, but never one so broken. Morden's once proud posture had crumbled into a hunched figure who jumped at every sound. "Begin your report, Captain," Velthak commanded, his voice echoing in the sterile room. Morden's hands shook as he activated the recording device. The small blue light flickered to life, casting shadows across his scarred face. 3 deep claw marks ran down his left cheek, souvenirs from his encounters with the humans. His military uniform, once pristine, now bore patches and repairs from countless battles. "It was supposed to be a simple conquest," Morden began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Intelligence told us the humans were primitive, barely capable of interstellar travel. Their ships looked like scrap metal held together with hope. Their weapons seemed outdated by centuries. We were wrong, terribly wrong." Velthak leaned forward in his chair. He had read the preliminary reports, but hearing it from a survivor was different. The numbers didn't lie. 3 full battle fleets had engaged the humans. Only scattered remnants had returned. The captain's voice cracked as he continued. "My first encounter was on the mining colony of Altair 9. We expected surrender. Instead, we found something that still haunts my dreams." "Tell me about the humans," Velthak pressed. His forearms folded across his chest. Morden closed his eyes. And for a moment, Velthak thought he might refuse to continue. The captain's breathing became shallow, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's cool temperature.
Ow.
"They don't fight like any species we've encountered," Morden finally said. "The Zephyrians retreat when outnumbered 3-1. The Crystalline Empire surrenders when their losses reach 20%. The Void Crawlers flee when their hive ships are damaged. But humans fight like they've been preparing for war their entire existence." Velthak activated his own recording device, a backup to ensure nothing was lost. "Explain what you mean by that." "Every human we encountered knew how to fight," Morden said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "Not just their soldiers, their miners, their engineers, their medical staff, even their children. It was as if warfare was bred into their very bones." The captain stood up suddenly, pacing to the small window that looked out onto the military complex. Outside, Nexari soldiers went about their daily routines, unaware of the horrors being discussed. "In this room, on Altair 9, we monitored their communications before the attack," Morden continued. "They were talking about crop yields, mining quotas, family gatherings, normal colony talk. But the moment our ships appeared on their sensors, everything changed." He turned back to face Velthak. Within minutes, they had transformed their entire colony into a fortress. Mining equipment became weapons. Civilian transport ships turned into attack vessels. Even their children were helping, carrying supplies and ammunition to defensive positions. Velthak made notes on his datapad. "What about their technology?" "Our reports suggested they were centuries behind us." "That's what we thought too," Morden said with a bitter laugh. "Their ships did look primitive. Oh, but they had modified them in ways we never imagined. They had turned cargo haulers into ram ships, converted mining lasers into weapons that could cut through our armor. Most terrifying of all, they had somehow jury-rigged their reactor cores to overload on command." The implications hit Velthak immediately. "They were willing to sacrifice their own ships." "Not just willing," eager Morden replied. "We watched 3 human ships deliberately ram our dreadnought. They were laughing over the communications as they did it, laughing as they turned themselves into guided missiles." Velthak's skin began to change color, a sign of stress among his species. "But surely their ground forces were more conventional."
I know, sir.
"If anything, they were worse," Morden said, returning to his seat. "We had expected to face organized military units. Instead, we found ourselves fighting an entire population that had instantly transformed into guerrilla fighters." He paused. staring at his hands. There was this one human female, couldn't have been more than 20 standard years old. She was working in their medical facility when we attacked. By the time we reached her position, she had turned surgical instruments into weapons and rigged the entire building with explosives made from medical supplies. Did you capture her? We tried. She took down 6 of my soldiers before triggering the explosives. But here's the thing that still keeps me awake at night. She was smiling when she did it. Not the mad grin of someone who had lost their sanity, but the satisfied smile of someone who had accomplished exactly what they set out to do. Velthok set down his datapad. Captain, I need you to be very specific about what happened next. Command needs to understand why we lost so many ships. Morden nodded slowly. The humans had no fear of death, Commander. None at all. They treated it like another tool in their arsenal. When they ran out of ammunition, they used their weapons as clubs. When their weapons broke, they fought with their bare hands. They were mortally wounded. They found ways to take our soldiers with them. The room fell silent, except for the humming of the air system. Velthak realized he was holding his breath. But that's not the worst part, Morden continued. The worst part was that they were learning. Every battle, every skirmish, they adapted. They studied our tactics and found ways to counter them. They salvaged our technology and improved it. By the end of the campaign, they were using our own weapons against us, but somehow making them more effective than we ever did. Earlier, Captain Morden stood on the bridge of his assault ship. Watching the red planet Altiranine grow larger on the main screen, the mining colony looked peaceful from orbit, just a small collection of domed buildings and industrial equipment scattered across the dusty surface. His fleet of 12 ships hung in perfect formation behind him, their dark hulls gleaming in the system's orange sunlight. Sir, we're picking up normal colony operations, reported his communications officer. Mining crews are still working. No signs of military preparation. Morden nodded, feeling confident. Intelligence had been clear. This was a simple industrial outpost with maybe 40 human workers. Most were civilians who had probably never seen combat. This would be an easy victory to start their campaign against humanity. Begin the assault, he ordered. I want this colony secured within the hour. The dropships launched from the main vessels carrying 300 of the Nexary's finest soldiers. Morden rode in the lead ship, watching the mining facility grow closer. Through the small viewport, everything looked normal. Too normal. Maintain formation, Morden commanded through his comm device as the ships touched down just outside the colony's perimeter. Remember, we want prisoners for interrogation. To keep casualties low, his soldiers moved out in perfect order, their blue armor glinting in the alien sun. The Nexari had conquered 17 different worlds using these same tactics. Their soldiers were disciplined, well-trained, and equipped with the best weapons their technology could produce. The mining facility appeared abandoned as they approached. No workers visible anywhere, no movement in the buildings. Even the massive excavation equipment sat silent. Too easy, Morden thought, but pressed forward. Anyway, maybe the humans had seen their ships and simply ran. It wouldn't be the first time. His soldiers spread out across the compound, checking buildings and securing key positions. The silence was unsettling, but Morden pushed the feeling aside. In minutes this would all be over. The first explosion came from beneath their feet. The ground erupted in a shower of dirt and metal as hidden charges detonated. Morden was thrown backward, his ears ringing from the blast. Around him, his soldiers were screaming as more explosions rocked the area. Ambush. Someone shouted over the comm. Before Morden could react, the humans emerged from concealed positions. They'd been there all along, hidden in maintenance tunnels, buried in equipment bays, camouflaged among the mining machinery. What looked like an abandoned colony had been transformed into a carefully planned killing field. A human male stepped out from behind an overturned hauler, wielding what looked like a standard mining laser. But something was wrong with it. The beam that shot from the device was 3 times brighter than any mining tool should be. It sliced through Nexar armor like paper, dropping 2 soldiers instantly. That's Deho, Morden would later learn. From intercepted communications, he's been working these mines for 15 years. Beside him, A female human operated what appeared to be a drilling device, but it was launching projectiles with deadly accuracy. Each shot found its mark, and Morden watched in horror as his elite soldiers fell to repurposed mining equipment. "Take cover," Morden screamed, but his soldiers were already falling. The humans moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of careful planning. They had studied Nexari tactics, learned their weaknesses, and prepared accordingly. Every position they held offered multiple escape routes. Every weapon they used had been modified for maximum effectiveness. A young human male named Tae-Sung appeared on a walkway above them, carrying what looked like a standard explosive charge used for breaking rock. But as he lit the fuse, Morden realized it was much larger than standard mining equipment. "Get down," Morden yelled, but Tae-Sung was already moving. The human leaped from the walkway. The lit explosive clutched to his chest. He landed in the middle of a group of Nexari soldiers, and for a moment, time seemed frozen. The young man looked directly at Morden and smiled. The explosion took out an entire squad. What followed was unlike anything Morden had ever experienced in warfare. The humans fought with a combination of tactical brilliance and reckless abandon that defied all military logic. When their modified weapons jammed, they used them as clubs. When they ran out of ammunition, they threw mining equipment with lethal accuracy. An older human female named Yunji had rigged the entire ventilation system of the main processing plant with improvised explosives. As Morden's soldiers tried to clear the building, she triggered the charges remotely, bringing down sections of the structure in a controlled collapse that trapped dozens of his men. But what truly terrified Morden was their attitude. These weren't desperate civilians fighting for their lives or enjoying themselves. He could hear laughter over the com channels as humans outmaneuvered his soldiers. They were treating this like some kind of game, one human continued. Fighting even after taking 3 plasma rounds to the chest. Instead of falling, he used his remaining strength to trigger an explosive device that had been hidden in his equipment belt. The blast took out an entire Nexari squad and left a crater where they had been standing. Reinforcements incoming. His lieutenant reported over the com. ETA 5 minutes? But 5 minutes felt like hours as the battle raged. Every building in the complex had been turned into a fortress. Every piece of equipment had been weaponized. The humans had transformed their entire colony into a trap, and Morden's soldiers were walking into it. By the time reinforcements arrived, the battle was over. The mining facility was in ruins, fires burning throughout the compound. Bodies lay scattered everywhere, but most of them wore Nexari blue armor. Morden stood in the smoking wreckage, trying to process what had happened. He had brought 300 elite soldiers against 30 human miners. The miners had won. "Sir," his lieutenant approached carefully. "Final casualty count." "How many?" Morden asked, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. "We lost 200 soldiers. The humans, ... all of them fought to the end. No prisoners taken." The survivors spoke in hushed tones about humans who laughed while bleeding, who turned their own deaths into weapons. They talked about miners who fought like they had been preparing for this battle their entire lives. As Morden looked around at the destruction, he realized something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. This wasn't just a successful ambush, it was a message. Humans were telling them that every colony, every outpost, every world they tried to conquer would cost them dearly. The war had just begun, and already Morden knew they were in trouble. The mining colony was just the beginning, Morden continued, his voice barely above a whisper. He stared at the metal table between them, his reflection distorted in its polished surface. Command thought it was an anomaly. They said losing 200 soldiers to miners was just bad luck. Poor planning. They ordered us to assault a human military station. Beltek leaned forward in his chair, his 6 eyes narrowing. "Kepler's station? I remember the reports. A month-long siege. We cut off all supply lines," Morden explained, his hands clenching into fists. "No food, no water, no ammunition. Standard siege protocol suggests surrender within 5 days for any rational species. We had done this dozens of times before on other worlds. It always worked." He paused, lost in the memory. "But humans aren't rational. not by our standards. Kepler Station hung in the void like a metal flower, its 5 arms extending from a central hub. When Morden's fleet arrived, the station housed 847 human personnel, military, civilian contractors, and support staff. It was supposed to be a quick victory, a way to restore confidence after the disaster at Alternine. "This is Fleet Commander Morden." He had broadcast on all frequencies. "Kepler Station, you are surrounded. Cut off from all supplies and reinforcements. Surrender now, and your people will be treated according to galactic conventions." The response came immediately, delivered by a stern-faced woman who appeared on the main screen. Her uniform was crisp, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes held a cold determination that made Morden uncomfortable. "This is Commander Hygiene of Kepler Station," she said calmly. "Your surrender offer is rejected. I suggest you reconsider your position." Morden had almost laughed. The audacity of it. A single station, surrounded by 12 warships, telling him to reconsider. "Commander, you have 847 people on that station," Morden replied. "We have enough firepower to reduce your facility to scrap metal. Be reasonable." Hygiene's expression didn't change. "Commander Morden, you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with. We are humans. We don't surrender. We adapt." The transmission ended, leaving Morden staring at an empty screen. He had given the order to begin the siege, confident that within days, humans would be begging for mercy. As days turned to weeks, Morden expected the humans to weaken. Their food supplies should have run out. Water recyclers should have failed, or morale should have collapsed. Instead, they adapted. His sensors detected strange energy readings from the station. A human engineer named Kyung Ho had begun converting life support systems into defensive weapons. Oxygen recyclers became gas dispersal systems that could flood approaching ships with toxic clouds. Water purifiers were modified into chemical weapon launchers that could spray corrosive compounds across hundreds of meters. Sir Lieutenant Zixavel reported during the second week, "They're doing something impossible. They're eating their own equipment." Morden studied the sensor readings in disbelief. "Explain." "They're dismantling non-essential systems and recycling the metal components into ammunition. They've turned their cafeteria into a foundry. They're melting down furniture, wall panels, even personal items to make projectiles." It was unthinkable. Every other species they had encountered would carefully preserve their equipment, knowing they might need it later. But humans were cannibalizing their own station to keep fighting. By week 3, the situation had become even more bizarre. Humans had begun using maintenance corridors as ambush points. A maintenance worker named Biora had rigged the entire ventilation system with improvised explosives. Every shaft, every tunnel, every service corridor had become a potential death trap. "They're not just defending," Zixaval reported. "They're hunting. Small groups of humans are using the maintenance shafts to attack our boarding parties from behind." Morden watched the tactical display in growing frustration. Every time his soldiers tried to board the station, they were met with coordinated resistance. The humans had turned their own home into a maze designed to kill intruders. "Sir, we're detecting modifications to their reactor core," his chief engineer reported. "They're deliberately running it at dangerous levels." "Are they trying to overload it?" Morden asked. "That's what's strange, sir. The modifications make it more efficient, not less stable. They're somehow squeezing more power out of a reactor that should have failed days ago." The final assault came at the end of the 4th week. Morden had grown tired of waiting. He's committed his entire ground force to a coordinated attack on all 5 arms of the station simultaneously. What they found inside defied belief. The humans had been awake for weeks, fueled by nothing but determination and whatever stimulants they could synthesize. For medical supplies, they moved through the corridors like ghosts, appearing and disappearing through hidden passages they had carved through the station's walls. Every room had been transformed into a killing field. Furniture had been arranged to create choke points. Lighting had been modified to blind attackers. Even the artificial gravity had been adjusted to give defenders an advantage. "They're not just fighting," one of his soldiers reported over the comm. "They're enjoying this. I can hear them laughing." Laughter was the worst part. As his soldiers fought their way through the station, they could hear human voices echoing through the corridors. Not screams of fear or cries of desperation, but actual laughter. The humans were having fun. When the station finally fell, Morden's forces found journals scattered throughout the facility, human writings that spoke of impossible battles throughout their history. Stories of soldiers who had held mountain passes against armies, cities that had fought sieges lasting years, entire civilizations that had battled extinction and won. One journal entry, written by a maintenance worker named Ji-hoon, particularly haunted Morden. Day 23 of the siege. We're down to eating recycled protein paste, but morale is actually improving. Kung-ho figured out how to turn the waste recyclers into projectile weapons. Biora rigged the entire level 7 with surprises for our visitors. The aliens still don't understand we're not fighting because we have to. We're fighting because we choose to. This is what we do. This is who we are. Another entry from a medical officer named Minna was even more chilling. The aliens keep expecting us to surrender. They don't understand that surrender isn't in our vocabulary. We've been fighting impossible odds since we crawled out of caves on Earth. We fought ice ages, plagues, wars that consumed entire continents. We fought each other until we learned to fight as one species. They want us to give up because they outnumber us. They clearly haven't studied human history. When the battle was over, Morden stood in the station's command center, surrounded by the bodies of humans who had fought to the very end. Commander Hyjin was found at her post, still trying to activate one final defensive system, even as she bled out from multiple wounds. The cost had been devastating. The station had fallen, but Morden had lost over 400 soldiers in the process. Nearly half his ground force gone? And for what? A single military outpost that the humans had effectively destroyed during the fighting. Sir Zixavel approached him in the ruins of the command center. We've secured the station, but there's something you need to see. He led Morden to a hidden chamber behind the main reactor. Inside, they found detailed plans for station defenses, tactical manuals, and most disturbing of all, complete intelligence profiles on Nexari military tactics. They were studying us, Morden realized. The entire siege was a learning exercise. For them, the humans had sacrificed their own people not just to inflict casualties, but to gather intelligence. Every attack his soldiers had made, every tactic they had used, had been carefully observed and recorded. As Morden looked around the devastated station, he realized the terrible truth. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a message. Humans were telling them that every battle would cost more than the last, because they were learning, adapting, evolving their methods with each encounter. The war was far from over. Already the humans were 3 steps ahead, Velthok noticed. Morden's hands had stopped shaking. Now they were clenched into fists, his knuckles white with tension. The change was disturbing, from terrified victim to barely contained rage. "Tell me about the prisoners," Velthok demanded, his voice sharp with authority. "That's when we learned." "The truth," Morden said, his voice taking on a bitter edge. "We captured 12 humans during the Kepler station assault. Standard interrogation procedures proved ... ineffective." Velthak pulled up the prisoner files on his datapad. "Humans against our entire interrogation division. What could possibly go wrong?" "Everything," Morden replied simply. The Nexari prison ship Voidrender was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. Its cells were designed to break the spirit of any prisoner within days. Sensory deprivation chambers, neural disruptors, mind reading, technology, everything needed to extract information from the most stubborn captives. The human prisoners were unlike any captives Morden had encountered. They were brought aboard unconscious, secured in the highest security cells, and placed under constant surveillance. Standard procedure for dangerous prisoners of war. The first sign something was wrong came during the initial processing. A young male named Jinwoo woke up in his cell, looked around calmly, and then did something no prisoner had ever done before. He smiled. "Good morning," he said to the security cameras. "I assume you'll want to talk soon. Have quite a lot to tell you." The interrogation began the next day. Ginwoo was strapped to a neural interface chair, surrounded by the most advanced mind-reading equipment the Nexari possessed. The lead interrogator, a specialist named Krelvin, had broken hundreds of prisoners using these methods. "Tell us about human military capabilities," Krelvin demanded. Activating the neural probe, Ginwoo's response was unexpected. Instead of resisting or breaking down, he began telling stories. Not military secrets, but tales of human history. Stories of wars that lasted centuries, of cities that fought to the last citizen, of soldiers who held impossible positions against overwhelming odds. "Did you know," Jinwoo said conversationally, "that humans once fought a war that lasted 100 years? Not continuously, but on and off for a century. Two human nations, destroying each other's armies over and over until finally one side ran out of people to fight." Krelvin tried to redirect the interrogation, but Jinwoo continued his historical narrative. He spoke of ancient human battles, of warriors who fought with primitive weapons against impossible odds. He described sieges that lasted years, soldiers who died rather than surrender, and civilians who took up arms to defend their homes. "Your species surrenders when faced with 3-1 odds," Jinwoo said calmly to his interrogator. "Humans consider those favorable odds. We've been fighting each other for so long that we've forgotten how to quit." The most disturbing part wasn't what Jinwoo was saying, but how he was saying it. He spoke with the enthusiasm of a teacher, sharing favorite stories with students. He was enjoying himself. Meanwhile, another prisoner was causing different problems. A female named So-young had actually requested additional interrogation sessions. When the guards brought her to the interrogation chamber, she sat down comfortably and began asking questions. "I'm curious about your species' military structure," she said to the surprised interrogator. "How do you maintain discipline among your troops? What motivates Nexari soldiers to fight?" The interrogator, confused by this reversal, tried to maintain control. "I asked the questions here," of course So-young replied. "But I'm genuinely interested in understanding your culture. For instance, your armor design suggests you prefer ranged combat. Do you find close quarters fighting uncomfortable?" Before the interrogator realized what was happening, he was answering her questions. She had somehow turned the entire session around, making him the subject of study rather than the other way around. "She was interrogating us," Morden realized now, his voice filled with grudging respect. "Every question we asked, she learned something about how we think, how we fight. She was gathering intelligence while pretending to be cooperative. But the most disturbing prisoner was an older male named Woo Jin. He never spoke during interrogation, never reacted to threats or promises. He simply sat in silence, watching his captors with calm, calculating eyes. What the Nexari didn't realize was that Woo Jin was communicating with the other prisoners through methods they couldn't detect. He used subtle sounds, tapping on walls, shifting in his restraints, even controlling his breathing patterns to create a complex code. Sir reported the ship's security chief after the first week. "We're detecting unusual patterns in the prisoner sections. Nothing we can identify. But the humans seem to be coordinating somehow." Morden had dismissed the report. How could prisoners in separate cells under constant surveillance possibly communicate? The answer came during the second week. A maintenance worker doing routine checks on the ventilation system discovered that the humans had been using the air ducts to pass messages. It somehow learned to manipulate the airflow patterns to create a crude but effective communication system. "They turned our own ship into a telegraph network," Morden explained to Velthok, "using sound, vibration, even changes in air pressure to talk to each other. The escape attempt came during the third week. Not a desperate bid for freedom, but a carefully orchestrated operation that demonstrated planning and coordination that should have been impossible. It started in the ship's medical bay. A prisoner named Dong Hyen had complained of illness and been taken for examination. While the medical staff was distracted, he somehow managed to override the door locks, using techniques that bypassed all their security protocols. Simultaneously, So-young created a distraction in the interrogation chamber by triggering a false fire alarm. The guards rushed to respond, leaving key corridors temporarily unguarded. Meanwhile, Wu Jin had spent weeks memorizing the guard rotation schedules. By listening to their footsteps and voices, he guided the other prisoners through the ship's corridors with the precision of someone who had studied the layout for months. How did they know our security protocols? Belthok interrupted. They had been observing everything, Morden replied. Every guard change, every routine check, every system activation. They turned 3 weeks of captivity into an intelligence-gathering operation. The prisoners didn't just escape. They sabotaged the ship's systems on their way out, disabling weapons and navigation. They stole intelligence data from the ship's computers, downloading tactical information about Nexari fleet movements and military capabilities. Most insulting of all, they left behind a message carved into the wall of their cell block. Thank you for the tactical information. We'll use it well. When Morden's forces finally regained control of the ship, they found evidence of the prisoners' activities throughout the vessel. Hidden tools made from salvaged materials, detailed maps of the ship's layout, and even psychological profiles of the interrogation staff had been studying us the entire time, Morden said, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and admiration. We thought we were learning about human capabilities, but they were learning about ours. The escaped prisoners had taken a small shuttle and somehow made it back to human space. Within days, Nexari forces began encountering new human tactics that specifically countered their standard procedures. Sir Veltak said carefully, "Are you saying the prisoners deliberately allowed themselves to be captured?" "I don't know," Morden replied, "but I suspect it. The humans we captured were all specialists, an engineer, a psychologist, a communications expert, a tactical analyst. It was too convenient to be coincidence. Implications were staggering. If humans were deliberately feeding themselves to Nexori interrogation centers to gather intelligence, it suggested a level of strategic thinking that went far beyond anything they had encountered. They sacrificed their own people, Velthak said. "No," Morden corrected. "They invested their own people. And the return on that investment was enormous. Within weeks, our entire interrogation program was compromised. The humans knew our methods better than we did." Velthek stared at the reports in growing horror. The humans hadn't just escaped from an impregnable prison ship. They had turned their captivity into a weapon, using their time as prisoners to gather the intelligence they needed to win the war. "What kind of species does that?" he whispered. "The kind that wins wars," Morden replied grimly. Velthak stood and paced the room, his multiple arms gesturing in frustration. The debriefing chamber suddenly felt smaller, more suffocating. "You're telling me that humans defeated our superior technology through ... stubbornness?" "No, sir," Morden replied, his voice carrying a weight that made Velthak pause mid-step. "That's what I thought initially. The post-war intelligence reports revealed something far more terrifying." Morden activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. The blue light cast eerie shadows on the walls as images of human military installations appeared across their territory. Massive orbital platforms, ship construction yards, and weapon systems that looked nothing like what the Nexari had encountered during the war. "The humans have weapons they never used against us," Morden continued, his voice growing quiet. "Strategies they never deployed. Ship designs we never encountered." Velthak studied the holographic images with growing alarm. He saw space stations the size of moons, equipped with weapons that could crack planets. He saw fleets of ships with designs that seemed to defy physics, their hulls covered in technology that made Nexari warships look like ancient relics. "This intelligence comes from where?" Velthak asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. The answer? "Trade delegations, diplomatic missions, even tourist visits," Morden replied. "The humans have been completely open about their capabilities. They've given us guided tours of facilities that could destroy our entire civilization." Hologram shifted, showing what appeared to be a human research facility. Inside, Velthak could see scientists working on projects that looked like something from a nightmare. Weapons that could manipulate gravity, devices that could cause stars to collapse, technology that could turn entire planets into guided missiles. "They have the capability to sterilize entire star systems," Morden said. "Technology that could turn planets into weapons. Ships that can travel faster than anything we've ever built. They could have ended our war in hours, not months. Velthak's 6 eyes widened as the implications hit him. Then why didn't they use them? Because they chose not to, Morden said. And for the first time since the debriefing began, his voice carried a note of something that might have been admiration. The war ended not because humans couldn't fight anymore, but because they decided to show mercy. The hologram changed again, showing battle footage from their conflict. But now, viewed through the lens of this new knowledge, everything looked different. The human ships that had seemed so primitive now appeared to be deliberately using older technology. The tactics that had seemed desperate now looked like careful experiments. Every battle we fought, every victory we thought we achieved, was within parameters they allowed, Morden continued. They were testing us, learning about us, studying our capabilities, while revealing none of their own. Velthak sank back into his chair, his mind reeling. You're saying they were ... playing with us? Not playing, Morden corrected. Training? They were using our war as a military exercise. Every engagement was a lesson for them, a chance to practice tactics they might need against future enemies. The hologram showed human military academies where young officers studied recordings of their battles against the Nexari. They were analyzing every move, every decision, every tactical error. The war that had cost thousands of Nexari lives was being used as educational material. I've studied their history, Morden said, standing up and facing his superior directly. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. They've perfected the art of warfare by fighting each other. What we experienced wasn't human warfare. At its peak, it was humans holding back. The display shifted to show historical human conflicts, battles that lasted years, sieges that consumed entire continents, wars that killed millions of their own species. And through it all, humans had continued to innovate, to adapt, to become more efficient at destruction. They fought two global wars that nearly destroyed their own planet, Morden explained. They built weapons that could end all life on their world, and then they chose not to use them. They've been practicing restraint for centuries. Velthak watched footage of human cities being rebuilt after devastating wars. He saw humans working together to heal the wounds they had inflicted on themselves, showing the same determination and peace that they had shown in war. The mining colony, Kepler Station. The prisoner escapes, all of it was humans operating at maybe 10% of their actual capability, Morden continued. They were learning what we could do while keeping their true strength hidden. The hologram showed current human activities throughout the galaxy. Peaceful trade missions, scientific expeditions, diplomatic contacts with dozens of species. But now Velthak could see the underlying pattern. Every human civilian was also a potential soldier. Every trade ship was designed to be converted into a warship. Every diplomatic mission was also a reconnaissance operation. They're everywhere, Velthak realized. How many species have they made contact with since our war ended? 47, Morden replied. And each contact follows the same pattern. Peaceful approach, generous trade agreements, cultural exchange programs. They're building a network of allies across the galaxy. The display showed human diplomatic missions to dozens of worlds. They were sharing technology, providing medical aid, offering military protection to smaller species. They were creating a galactic community with themselves at the center. But here's what's truly frightening, Morden said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. They're not conquering these species. They're recruiting them. Every world they contact becomes stronger, more advanced, more capable of defending itself. Velthak saw the truth of it in the data. Human allies were developing new technologies, building stronger militaries, creating more stable governments. The humans weren't building an empire. They were building an alliance. They're preparing for something, Velthak said. Or someone, Morden corrected. The humans know something we don't. They're turning the entire galaxy into a fortress, and they're doing it through friendship instead of conquest. The hologram displayed the current galactic map. Human influence spread like a web across known space, connecting species that had never worked together before. Trade routes that doubled as military supply lines, research stations that could be converted into weapons platforms. A peaceful expansion that was also the most effective military buildup in galactic history. "We thought we were fighting soldiers," Morden said, his words echoing in the chamber. "We were fighting a species that treats galactic conquest as a training exercise. Could have ended this war in days, but they chose to study us instead. They learned our weaknesses, our tactics, our technology." "And now?" Velthok asked, though he already knew the answer. "Now they know everything about us, and we know nothing about their true capabilities," Morden replied. "The peace treaty isn't protection for us, Commander. It's mercy. And mercy is a choice humans can revoke at any time." The recording device clicked off with a soft beep, leaving the two Nexari officers in silence. The holographic display faded, but the images remained burned into their minds. A species that had turned warfare into an art form, that had chosen compassion over conquest, that had transformed their enemies into unwilling teachers. Velthak stared at the blank space where the hologram had been. "What do we do with this information?" "We pray," Morden said simply. "We pray that whatever the humans are preparing for, they continue to see us as allies rather than threats. Because if they ever decide we're a problem that needs solving..." Didn't need to finish the sentence. They both understood. The galaxy's most dangerous predators had chosen to be gardeners instead, nurturing a community of species that could stand together against whatever darkness might come. But underneath that peaceful exterior lay the capacity for destruction that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. And somewhere in human space, military planners were studying the lessons learned from their war with the Nexari, preparing for conflicts that hadn't even begun yet. The humans had won more than a war. They had won the future itself, and they had done it through the simple act of choosing mercy over vengeance. For now, the end.